Okay, class, in this video we're finishing up the intellectual virtues by talking about fair-mindedness. So again, the virtues, these are the traits that we're trying to develop in our mind. They're essential for us to be good critical thinkers. They make us more fair-minded and open-minded and truth-seeking as a thinker, instead of being narrow-minded and self-serving as a person. This takes a strong commitment to these virtues and developing them as a person, and we'll see how that all comes to a head here in this video. It takes years and years of practice to really develop these, and you have to pay attention to everything that you think and you do to develop these. They're all interdependent on each other, and they develop in conjunction with the other ones, and we'll see how that works here in just a second too. So this is the last one that we talk about, and we see how it all comes to a head with fair-mindedness. So fair-mindedness is we can treat all viewpoints in an unbiased, unprejudiced way. And this also means that we try to figure out what is most fair in every situation. And I think the key in that little sentence is most fair. I know a lot of the decisions that we make, the solutions that we come up with, the conclusions that we make, it seems impossible to make those fair to every single person involved. Take our government for issue. They pass laws and legislation all the time. And, not everyone's pleased because they can't please everyone. They have to try to figure out, and hopefully that they do this. I know sometimes it doesn't seem that they do, but they have to try to figure out what is most fair for everyone in every situation, if that makes sense. It's not going to be fair to every single person, but what is most fair to most of the people. That's what we're trying to achieve. Fair-mindedness requires thinkers to simultaneously be humble, courageous, empathetic, honest, perseverant, autonomous, and confident in their reasoning. What does this look like? We just covered all of these. They're all the intellectual virtues. So everything that we've learned so far, all the other virtues, if you can do all of these and you've practiced doing them and you've become excellent in all of these, then you can be fair-minded, okay? So fair-mindedness results from you doing all the other things that we have learned about. It's a really tall order, and just to put your mind at ease about it being such a tall order, and I'm not really expecting you to get to that point, because our brains can never really fully achieve this fair-mindedness completely. Our human mind is naturally too self-serving and too egocentric. And again, I've touched on this before. It just goes back to our ancestors and the way that they were. I mean, they had to take care of themselves, right? They had to be selfish in a lot of ways just to survive. And it's kind of still in our brains a little bit that we are self-serving in that way, and we hold on to our beliefs and our ideas a little bit too much. And I don't think that anyone could ever be so fully enlightened to be completely fair-minded. But what we can do is work on developing all these other great traits that we have learned about in an effort to become as fair-minded as possible. That's what I'm looking for here. This makes us a better critical thinker. It's hard work to practice all of these things together, along with all those standards, those intellectual standards that we learned about. It's hard to practice all this together, but that's something that you have to do, because the more progress you make to becoming a fair-minded person, the more that your mind is self-disciplined, the more your mind will not be easily manipulated, the more your mind will be able to reason logically to find the truth and evidence and proof that we need to make these good decisions in life and in work and in school and everything else. And the more your mind will be able to strive at all times possible to think fairly. This is what we're striving for as critical thinkers. It's all right here on this slide. And this is where it's all kind of coming to the head. We've learned to break down our thoughts with the elements of thought. We've learned to assess all those different parts of thinking, all those elements, by applying those intellectual standards. And now we're learning about these traits that we need to develop to become fair-minded. This is what our goal is as a critical thinker, is to become fair-minded. And it means applying everything that we've learned in this class so far. So the opposite of fair-mindedness is intellectual unfairness. This involves a lack of a sense of responsibility to represent accurately and fairly viewpoints that don't line up to our own. And I misspelled to which one disagrees. I said which is not a word, I guess. But in any case, this means that we don't feel responsible for really considering other people's viewpoints unless they line up with our own. That's unfair, and we don't need to do that as critical thinkers. These thinkers almost always think that they are correct and that they are just and that they are right. They think that they're being fair, and they're not. If they're not really considering other viewpoints in a fair and accurate way, then they are not being just. They can't say that they are, but they really think that they are. They think that they can rationalize their behavior and convince themselves that they are right. They are very self-deceiving in this way. They like to think, oh, I'm doing it because it's going to be good for these people and blah, 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 when really it might just be good to line their pockets with money or to get them more power. They can rationalize a lot of bad things that they do because they can convince themselves that they're doing the right thing even when they are not. These people only consider their own interests and beliefs when they think about an issue. They don't really want to hear about other people, or if they do, they're like, yeah, but that doesn't really help me at all. It doesn't help me get further in this life, so why do I really need to pay attention to it? They don't apply all the standards that we learned about. They don't try to grow all the virtues and traits that we have talked about. They probably don't even know that they really exist. Or maybe they do know they exist, but they don't really care about developing them. And they only favor views that line up with their own. And they don't really evaluate and analyze their views to see if they might maybe be wrong. So fair-mindedness, what can we ask to help us achieve this? To what extent do self-interests or biases tend to cloud my judgment? This is something you have to be aware of when you're making decisions at work or you're trying to solve a problem or an issue. You need to ask yourself, what interests do I have in this? Is there anything that's going to help me get further or benefit me in some way? And if you can ask that and answer it and identify what your interests are, then you can really hone in on them to make sure you're being fair about them and not just doing what's good for you, but doing what's right and fair. The next one. How do I tend to treat relevant viewpoints? Do I tend to favor some over others? And if so, why? That's something really good to consider too. Relevant, that was one of the things that we talked about with the standards. We need to make sure that we consider relevant viewpoints to making your decision or creating a solution, even if they oppose ours. So that kind of goes with the next one. Do I tend to favor some viewpoints over others? Are they the ones that line up with my own? Are these the viewpoints that help further my interests that I have in this? That's something you really need to question. And if you do favor some over others, why? So if you can answer these questions, maybe that can help you try to be more fair-minded about it. Okay? To what extent do I appropriately weigh the strengths and weaknesses of all significant, relevant perspectives when reasoning through an issue? So this is pretty much the fairness of it. Are you weighing all the strengths and weaknesses of all the relevant perspectives in your reasoning? Are you trying to be fair in the solution that you're coming up with? This is something that you have to ask yourself. What personal interests do we have at stake here, and how can we ensure that we don't favor our own interest over the common good? That's it in a nutshell. Are you being fair is what this is asking. But this is something that you need to list out and be honest about. What are your personal interests at stake in this issue? How can you make sure that you're not just catering to your own interest and that you're trying to do what's fair for everyone? And then reflection time. To what extent do you personally want to become a person whose characteristics are defined by all the virtues that we've learned about? So, do you want to be known as a person that is humble, courageous, empathetic, that has autonomy, integrity, perseverance, confidence, and reason? Do you want to be known as a fair-minded person? That's what I'm asking here at the beginning. And then to what extent do you want to become a person that's known for being that kind of a person? And when you think about those traits, I know that something that comes to your mind is a good person. How important is that goal to you, to become a good person that has these traits? Discuss this with a family member, a classmate, or a friend. Discuss your commitment or lack thereof. Maybe this isn't important to you to use these traits to become a better person. Discuss that with somebody. Discuss your commitment or your lack thereof with someone. And honesty is the key here. If you're not honest about where you are in this process and where you want to be in this process and how you're going to get there, then it's not going to work. You have to be honest. And then once you consider all of those things, make a list of actionable goals, actions that you can take in your life, that you can put in place to help you become a more fair-minded person. That's what we're trying to do with this entire class, is all right here on this one little screen here. What actionable goals can you put in place to help you become a more fair-minded person? And remember, fair-minded includes all the standards that we learned about, the clarity, accuracy, relevancy, depth, breadth, all of those, and all of these intellectual virtues. What are you going to put in place in your life to become more fair-minded, including all of these things that we have learned about so far? Put that on paper and discuss it with somebody. Again, that holds you accountable when you talk to someone else. If they know that you're trying to change, or maybe that you don't believe any of this and maybe they can convince you otherwise, that maybe you need to work on some of these things. It always helps to get someone else's perspective and their point of view on what you're trying to do.